All right, Keith, thank you very much. So, do we need to update the Second Amendment? It's a conversation that you guys are having all over social media right now with your friends and your family and your neighbors. So, we want you to tell us what you think. Is the Second Amendment outdated? Go to pulse.newscentermaine.com to vote or open up the Pulse tab on our mobile app.
So here on News Center Now, we listen to you guys and we answer your questions.
And that is exactly what we are doing today. So after a former Supreme Court Justice and President Donald Trump very publicly disagreed about the future of gun rights in our country, we took your Second Amendment questions to a constitutional expert. Here's what the Second Amendment reads. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In a New York Times op-ed, former Supreme Court Associate Justice John Paul Stevens writes that students involved in the March for Our Lives movement should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment. He says the Second Amendment was originally drafted out of concern that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states, and that concern is, quote, a relic of the 18th century. President Donald Trump firing back early this morning on Twitter. The Second Amendment will never be repealed. We need more Republicans in 2018 and must always hold the Supreme Court. But a repeal is no small task.
What he's proposing would be very difficult to accomplish in reality.
Constitution lawyer Marshall Tinkle says repealing the Second Amendment would require 2/3 of the states in the country supporting a change. Federal lawmakers can barely agree on anything gun-related.
It's sort of like saying I can't afford to start a grocery store, so I'm going to build a shopping mall instead.
Susan wonders if a convicted felon's rights have been infringed when a judge rules they can't possess a gun. Tinkle says it's not unconstitutional to restrict people's rights to own guns. The government already does.
The state can still regulate whether a convicted felon can own a firearm.
Other parts of the Bill of Rights, even the First Amendment, have restrictions too. Free speech is an unalienable right, but you can't shout fire in a crowded movie theater. Andrew asks, if the Second Amendment is outdated, isn't the whole Bill of Rights outdated? Many of the Bill of Rights still are very applicable today, including rules around search and seizure, cruel and unusual punishment, and making sure people get a fair shake in the court system. Now he says, really the only clearly outdated amendment is the third, in which no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. But obviously you don't really hear anybody talking about the Third Amendment with any complaints.